Thankfully, over the weekend, we avoided going into nuclear war with North Korea. Let's keep that up. But despite that, tensions do continue to rise, especially with some of the statements coming out of the Trump administration, although we have updates as well. First, we want to show you Vice President Pence was at the DMZ speaking about the issue, and here's what he had to say about the current situation with North Korea.
I'm here to express the resolve of the people of the United States and the President of the United States to achieve that objective through peaceable means, through negotiations, but all options are on the table. The era of strategic patience is over. The President and I have great confidence that China will properly deal with North Korea. But as President Trump made clear just a few short days ago, if China is unable to deal with North Korea, the United States and our allies will.
So this is an enormously serious story, and I'm going to have enormously serious commentary in a second. But and what I'm about to say is unacceptable. So you have that to look forward to. But in the half a second when that first video started, and I saw the Korean guy on the black beret surrounding Pence, I thought, oh no, they have him.
He was kidnapped at the DMZ.
No, it's of course with the South Koreans he was standing with.
Yes, thankfully. They're different people, Cenk. Jeez. Okay, now he also said there, by the way, that all options are on the table. Last week we broke down why any military conflict, nuclear or otherwise, with North Korea would be an absolute disaster. They're still considering that possibility. But we also have HR McMaster, the guy that took over for the disgraced Mike Flynn when he was forced to flee DC. And he's gonna sort of modulate that rhetoric just a little bit. Let's watch.
The president has made clear that he will not accept the United States and its allies and partners in the region being under threat from this hostile regime with nuclear weapons. And I think what you saw last week with the president's decisive response to the Assad regime's mass murder of innocent people, including children with chemical weapons, that this national security team is capable of rapidly responding to those sorts of crises or incidents and events and providing the president with options. And our president is clearly comfortable making tough decisions and responding.
But the military option's still on the table?
Oh, all options are on the table.
A few moments later.
This problem is coming to a head, and so it's time for us to undertake all actions we can, short of a military option, to try to resolve this peacefully.
So maybe military is on the table, maybe it's not, depending on which particular portion of any interview you listen to. But the general consensus is that there was a plan supposedly that if they tested a nuclear weapon over the past few days, we would have attacked them. Thankfully, that didn't happen. They did not, in fact, test a nuclear weapon. Instead, they tested yet another ballistic missile. Now, this did not go well. They've had a lot of failures of ballistic missiles. This one might have been particularly embarrassing. Let's watch. There were high hopes, but it didn't work out. Now, some people think that US cyber war, cyber hackers might be the reason that so many of their missiles don't quite work. I blame the Roadrunner in that particular case, but the US might be a factor.
Well, they were very proud of this missile. Now we're not joking. Called the Musadan, and lately it has not been working very well. That video is not that far off. 88% of the tests with the Musadan missile have failed, and in the past they had worked, believe it or not. So look, Ben Magos and I have been skeptical about North Korea being able to do anything effectively militarily for a long, long time. Literally now decades that we've been on the air on the Young Turks because they can't make the toilets flush. On the other hand, their missiles do launch fairly regularly, hence they are bought in the open market in the world, which is disconcerting for a number of reasons. But lately they have not, and people think that's because of our cyber warfare, which would be an excellent use of our cyber warfare. Usually it is directed against American citizens and we're totally against it. But if it's directed against madmen's missiles, perfect, that's exactly what cyber warfare could be used for.
I mean, if they were to conclusively show that it was us that did it, that theoretically could spark a conflict in the same way that a physical attack could.
I'd
say it's less likely, but it is still possible.
I really want us to be able to make sure that their missiles don't work.
I do too.
So I would roll the dice on that. Now, speaking of which, let's break down what makes sense here from the Trump administration and what doesn't. So let me start with the things that don't make sense, and I will circle back to that as well at the end. First, when McMaster and Pence talked tough about how we showed the world, and Pence talked about the world witnessed the strength and resolve of our new president with bombings in Syria and Afghanistan. We bomb Syria and Afghanistan all the time. We just happen to bomb the Assad government, and we barely dented it. We purposely left their airfield pristine so the Russians could keep using it. So this whole idea of like, we showed them is so stupid. Yeah. Like, oh, we'll show the North Koreans too. No, you won't. You won't show them anything. These missiles that they paraded around that John talked about the other day, they're buried deep in the mountains of North Korea. You're not like, look, we're gonna get some of them, and maybe a lot of them will not launch, hopefully if we did our cyber warfare right, etc. But you aren't gonna get all of them, and this bravado and tough talk is stupid and senseless and doesn't get you anything, okay? So that's point one. Point two is, when Mike Pence says the era of strategic patience is over, that's also disconcerting. So look, I want you to do things that get us to a conclusion, because this North Korean madman and this regime being around for now 64 years. His grandfather was a murderous, insane dictator. His father was, he is, okay? And it's been hanging over the world's head for all this time. Yeah. And the reason we're more concerned is now we're worried that, I saw a number out there that North Korea could actually maybe get a long-range missile that reaches America in 2026. Now that's still a long way away, but hey, you don't want to take any chances. Besides which, the thing that people don't talk about, which drives me crazy, is they could reach South Korea today.
Yeah.
So killing millions of people.
And Japan.
Yeah, and I actually care about the South Koreans. It's not like, oh, if they reach Seattle, then it's a big deal. If they don't, it's not a big deal. No, it's a giant deal right now, and it has been for a long time.
Yeah, and a little follow-up. So people, I got a little bit of a pushback from my claims last week that they don't currently have any capacity to reach even the west coast of the US, especially with a nuclear weapon. And some people said, well, they have submarines. And they do, but you have to actually look at the submarines they have. Submarines are not the same as submarines. And so I've looked at them. They have a couple of submarines that can arguably fire some kind of missile. But the vast majority of their submarines are incredibly small things. These are not large nuclear powered submarines of the same sort that the US has. And we also have submarine defense in our Navy. So just understand that simply because they have submarines doesn't mean they have submarines like we do that can fire tridents and all that.
Yeah, look, the downside of their capabilities that they are trying to expand is they're now working on long-range missiles. They're also working on a hydrogen bomb, which would be 1,000 times more powerful than Hiroshima. That is deeply troubling, okay? Yeah. Now, they haven't gotten to either one of those yet, so we don't have to panic and launch tomorrow. But if you live on the west coast of the United States, you begin to understand the concerns that Korea and Japan, South Korea and Japan have had for a long time. And so I think that I like that we're beginning to try to resolve this, which we should have done a long time ago. But with Trump in charge, I'm a little worried about how we're going to resolve it. But let me give you some good news. So they talked about redoubling the efforts when it comes to diplomatic and economic pressure. Okay, good. That's the direction that you should go in. Any kind of launch is almost by definition going to be a complete disaster, because it's going to kill at a bare minimum thousands, tens of thousands, and perhaps up to millions of South Koreans, let alone North Koreans, let alone Japanese, okay? So when you talk about diplomatic and economic pressure, well, it's a little mixed bag. Sanctions don't work very well in countries led by dictators, because you just can't squeeze hard enough to get the caviar out of the dictator's hands. And he doesn't care, he murders his own people anyway. He's got gulag on top of gulag. They didn't work in Iraq, they were not gonna work in North Korea, they haven't worked in North Korea in the past. But diplomatic pressure could, because they really do need the Chinese. So that's where we need our patience to be at an end.
Strategic patience.
That's right.
But it's ended.
Oh, thank God. Thank God.
We don't have patience anymore.
That's right. So now I thought Obama was far too patient. I thought he should have put more pressure on the Chinese. Now, the Trump team is saying that they are doing that. At the same time, Trump had a meeting with the Chinese leader, Xi Jinping. And he says, well, it turns out it's more complicated than I realized. You got the quote, John?
Yeah, after listening for 10 minutes, well, the guy talked for 10 minutes. We don't know how long Trump actually listened. I realized it's not so easy. It's not what you would think.
Who thought North Korea was gonna be easy? He's such a schmuck.
There's a quote from the 80s where he talked about why he should be in charge of nuclear diplomacy. He said, I could learn in an hour everything you need to learn about nuclear weapons, and then I could put pressure on the Russians to get rid of their nukes. So he has not evolved from that position for 30 years.
But think about that. He said, I can get ready on nuclear weapons in an hour. Well, why didn't you take that hour before you met with the leader of China?
Couldn't fit it in the last 3 decades.
Where he had to basically do a 10-minute seminar for you on what's going on. And you can't trust a Chinese leader to tell you what the reality is. He's gonna tell you the Chinese perspective. You are so monumentally stupid.
But a good deal maker, after all. Back in the 80s, he said it would take him 60 minutes to learn about nukes, and he was able to negotiate that down to 10 minutes with the Chinese.
So, now one of the top nuclear experts in the country told the New York Times that this is a Cuban Missile Crisis in slow motion. Now, if you were going to apply diplomatic pressure on China and you were going to start negotiating, and to be fair to the Trump team, they have in some ways very ham-handed publicly when it should be done privately, but talked about, hey, maybe I don't call you a currency manipulator with all of the trade ramifications if you help me with North Korea. Okay, now we're getting somewhere that is actually diplomacy, pressure, our strategic patience coming to an end that could be done in a positive way. So, hey, I'm keeping an open mind here. But if you've got a Cuban Missile Crisis and instead of JFK, you got a knucklehead like Donald Trump and his #1 concern is his own ego.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And has talked about how badly he wants to use nukes and says, why are we gonna have them if we don't get to use them?
Man, if I'm in South Korea or Japan today, I am incredibly nervous.
Yeah, especially came out today, a senior North Korean official said that the US had created a, quote, dangerous situation in which a thermonuclear war may break out at any minute.
Young Turks now has over 6 billion lifetime views. You know who did that? You did that. We're now larger than CNN, ABC, you name a news network online, we're larger than them. And you built all that as everyone scoffed and didn't believe. And here we are, guys, thanks to you. Build independent media together with us at tytnetwork.com/join.